Today's fly is a Luscious Leech. This is a swing fly, probably the first confidence fly I made for swinging for steelhead on the Pure Marquette in any situation, low water, high water, dirty water. It's just a great fly, and it's basically an egg-sucking leech is all it is, with a lot of movement to it. It's tied with, we're gonna put black rabbit, but you could use purple, you could use olive. And in between this rabbit, we're going to palmer a giant wood duck feather into it. So this is a flank feather off of a wood duck, and it's very webby, has lots of movement. You could use mallard flank, guinea, any type of flank feather that's pretty stiff, but yet has got a lot of web to it. It's gonna move a lot in the water column. Finish it off with an egg head. I usually do orange or like the shrimp color. It's just a good, natural type color. I fish this fly probably the most in lower clear water situations, or basically not in a high heavy stain type water, just your basic kind of water conditions. Probably not so much in a heavier, like dirtier water. It doesn't have any flash on it, but yeah. I started fishing this fly probably 20 years ago when I really got into swinging flies, and it's always been a very productive confidence fly for me, whether I'm fishing it or tying it on for clients. For the hook, we're going to tie it on a Daiichi 2461. I like using iron hooks still. This is a very sharp hook, but it's a lighter wire, so it'll come off the bottom easy if you do get hung up. So we're gonna use, for thread, same thing, the black 140 ultra thread. It's a heavier thread. I can really put a lot of pressure on it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start at the eye of the hook, and I wanna make a bunch of thread wraps, working my way to the back of the hook. So when we started this video series on our channel here, we kind of wanted to do a different take on tie-in flies for a lot of people that are really getting into it. Like, you'll see a lot of fly tying videos are kind of, the camera is facing at myself, and we're going to give it more of a perspective of actually looking at it from as if you were tying it too. So hopefully that'll help a lot of people out when it comes to, beginner fly tyers, on how to get a perspective on how to start it and finish it. And that's probably the biggest thing with tying flies. It's, you always got to remember you want to get a thread wrap, because we want to lay that material on that thread and we don't want it to spin. So we want a heavy thread wrap, and we always want to start from the front of the hook and work our way back. And then when we put our material on, we're going to work our way back up front and we're going to finish it off. But you always have to keep in mind, you want to leave, a little bit behind the eye of the hook, because that's where you're going to end up doing your whip finish and finishing the fly off. You don't want to overcrowd everything, and that's probably the hardest thing with fly tying that I see with beginners. They have a tendency to overcrowd everything, and especially like with a streamer, we don't want a lot of material crowding the gap of this hook, because then, obviously the fish isn't going to be able to get his mouth around it and get the hook. So that's one thing you got to really, when you're tying, keep that in mind, that you want to keep everything spaced nicely, so by the time you get done to finish it off, you got room to finish it off. We don't want to overcrowd everything. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do our black rabbit strip. And this is a strip, it's not a cross cut. And we're going to start right on the back here for our tail. And we want to get basically the length of the shank of the hook. We don't want to get it too long, like so, because then it's just going to wrap around the fly when casting it. So we want to keep it long enough where it's going to get some movement, but not too short where it's stiff, but we won't want it super long, because then it's just going to wrap around the hook while casting. So I always like to just start like right about there, right at the shank of the hook, and I'm going to kind of pull it back with my fingers and just give it some really good thread wraps. And rabbit, you do have to cinch it down, so a heavier thread's gonna help, because it will have a tendency to spin on you. Yeah, it's pretty funny in the whole realm of fishing. I have a lot of people ask me over the years, like, if you could have one fly in your box, what fly would that be? And I would say for the type of fishing I like to do, an egg-sucking leech is a fly that you could take with you anywhere in the world, and I bet you could catch fish on it, whether it's salmon, trout species, steelhead. It's just a very effective fly. So that's how I'm going to do that. There's my tail. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this back, and here we go with our thread wraps. So what I want to do now is I'm going to move my thread to about halfway on the shank, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rabbit, and you might have to play with your fingers a little bit to get it so it, you know, like I said, you don't want it to spin, but I'm pulling it tight, and I'm just palmering it, working it forward to the front of the hook, to about where I stopped my thread. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cinch it down, pulling it tight, because same thing, I don't want it to spin on me. And then I'm just going to let it fall behind, just like that for now. Then I'm going to take my wood duck flank feather, because I'm going to palmer this in through the rest of that rabbit, so it's kind of sticking out between it, and that's going to give it some really good movement. So now for this, I'm going to tie it in tip first, but the easiest way to do this is I'm going to remove the shorter part of the feather, the stems on this side, and I want to make sure I get it this side because I've already wrapped everything this way, so I want to wrap my wood duck flank the same way. And you can see you got your shiny side of the feather, is what I would say, and then your dull side. So I'm going to pull this back with my fingers, and I'm going to tie it in right here at the tip, like so. So basically like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my thread a little bit more towards the front, but same thing, I don't want to overcrowd it because I got to put an egg head on here, and I still got to wrap this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the rabbit to the front, like so, and I'm going to tie it off. Same thing, pull the rabbit tight. I'm giving it some pretty good cinches to get that rabbit so it's getting tight around the shank of that hook. And then I'm going to pull that thread and put some pressure on it. Just like that. And I want to cinch it down a little bit, like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this wood duck feather, and I'm going to palmer it, just kind of move it in between some of the rabbit. I don't want to overcrowd it, but I just want that rabbit to still kind of lay over it. And just kind of pull it with your fingers. And then I'll just kind of pull it. Same thing, and then I'm going to tie it off. And then I'm going to pull it all back with my fingers. And I'm coming back, because like we said before, we don't want to overcrowd the hook. So I got this material on here. And trim it up a little bit. Kind of work some of these feathers out with my fingers. If you get like a loop, you can just cut it and trim it down, or you're going to cover it up anyways with your schlappen, because we're going to put a collar of that on this too. So it gives a lot of movement. So next we're going to take a schlappen feather. in black, or you could do blue, you could do purple, chartreuse. Like I said, this is basically just an attractor egg-sucking leech fly, so you could make it any which way you want. I like to tie it just kind of a more natural colors because I use it more throughout the year, but it seems like it's more effective when the water's a little lower and clearer. So I'm going to find a webby one. You can see how it's pretty thick in here, which is good. And what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of bring it back with my fingers. And just like the wood duck, we're going to tie it in. So basically tip first. We want the shiny side up. So we'll give it a nice So hopefully the perspective of this angle too, you guys will get to see how this is done. And then we're just going to, same thing, just kind of work it towards the eye of the hook. Just kind of getting the feathers pulled back and brought out. And then we're going to stop here. We don't want to get into this thinner webbing type part of the feather. We want to stop where the feather's a little bit stiffer and thicker in diameter, because that's what's going to move a lot more too in the current. It's going to give it a better profile and volume to the fly. And then we're just going to, same thing, we're going to tie it off, kind of move our thread wrap back, just like so. So now you can see everything tends to lay itself back over each other with the rabbit, the wood duck, and then the schlappen. And you could finish it off right there even. You'd have a pretty cool little, rabbit spay fly. But we're going to add a little hot spot with the egg head. We're going to keep it a little more natural still, so we're going to go to a lighter tone of egg with the shrimp color. I like adding hot spots to a fly, such as, that's basically what an egg-sucking leech is. It looks like an egg, but it's kind of a hot spot. And to me, the hot spot is basically for that fish to grab the contrast of that color. He's focused more on the color. He sees the color. All of a sudden he sees, a lot of motion in the back of the fly. Oh, that looks like a leech, or it could be a sculpin or a goby. But this is at first, to me, what he focuses on, whether it's flash on the fly or just a little chartreuse or a bright orange, ice dub, or any type of dubbing. That kind of is what it's grabbing his or her attention, triggering that predator instinct. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a big clump of this, usually about a pencil width, and I'm going to just take it and get a couple thread wraps, and I'm going to pinch it right around the hook, like so. Give it some pressure with my two fingers, and then I'm going to come around with my thread wrap right in the middle and put some pressure on it. And then there's going to be a lot of excess. We'll just set it to the side. You can use it for a different fly. We're just going to trim it small. I don't want it too buoyant, because that's it too. This will add buoyancy to the fly too. So the thicker you make your heads, whether it's a sculpin head or like a leech head like so, it's going to make that fly ride up in the surface more. It's going to make it harder for it to drop. And as you've seen in the past, I don't add a lot of weight to my flies, but if I need to add weight, I just buy a bunch of these little worm weights or bullet heads, and you can get them in all different sizes, and I'll slide that down onto my leader. And it's just an easy way to do it. So I'm just going to pull this off, and then same thing, I'm going to kind of fluff it all out, and I'm going to bring it right back to the front here. Push it back though. See, I almost overcrowded my own fly. We're going to push it back. So if you overcrowd the eye, the best thing to do, which I almost did here, but what you can do is just don't push it too hard, but just slightly turn it. And you can actually still use it. Just give it enough, you know, to do your whip finish. But we came close. Just trim this up. And we'll whip finish it off. And then if you have head cement, you can apply that too. It'll make the fly last a little bit longer so it's not falling apart. You know, whether by hooking fish, which hopefully that's the case, or throwing it into the trees. I don't really put a lot of head cement on my flies because I tie so many of them that it's just, it would take forever to sit and put, you know, it just slows the process down, but a lot of people do use it. Plus, I'm not a fan of head cement either, because there's one thing I don't like doing, and that's trying to open up the eye of the hook because it's full of head cement when you're out there, especially in the winter when it's, you know, 15, 25 degrees out and your fingers aren't working right anyways, and you got to sit there and try to get your leader through the hole of the eye of the hook.